For a lot of people today, Shannon Sharpe is just a personality. The debates, the viral clips, the loud energy on television. But if that is all you know him for, then you are missing the real story. Because long before the cameras, Shannon Sharpe was one of the most dominant tight ends the NFL has ever seen. And not just dominant, influential, the kind of player that changed how the position is played. So the real question is not whether he was good. The real question is, how good was Shannon Sharpe actually? Because when you go back to the beginning, nothing about his path suggested he would become a Hall of Famer. He was born in Glenville, Georgia, into a situation where survival came before opportunity. His parents split when he was just a baby. Money was always tight. Stability was never guaranteed. In fact, he once said they were so poor that a robber broke into their home and they ended up robbing the robber just to get by. That was not a joke, that was reality. And then things got even harder. His father passed away from cancer while he was still young, which meant growing up without a father figure during some of the most important years of his life. But that is where his grandmother stepped in. She raised Shannon, his siblings, and extended family members all under one roof. The house was small, the conditions were tough, no insulation, cold winter, crowded space. But what they lacked in comfort, they made up for in discipline. And in that environment, two things became clear. Shannon was tough, and sports were the way out. But even there, he was not the main story at first. That was his older brother, Sterling Sharpe. And that part matters more than people realize. Because when you grow up watching your older brother dominate, watching him become the standard, it creates a constant comparison. And Sterling was not just good, he was elite, dominating at South Carolina, then stepping into the NFL, and immediately becoming one of the best wide receivers in the league. First team All-Pro, multiple Pro Bowls, putting up numbers that demanded attention, and for Shannon, that meant living in the shadow of someone who was already great. Shannon followed him as an athlete, but not in reputation, at Glenville High School. Shannon was a multi-sport standout, football, basketball, track. He could do everything, but academically he struggled, and that limited his opportunities, while Sterling went to a major program. Shannon's only real option was Savannah State, a Division II school that most NFL scouts barely paid attention to. And right there is where most stories like this end. Smaller school, less exposure, limited opportunity. But this one did not, because at Savannah State, Shannon Sharpe did not just play football, he dominated it, and not in a quiet way either. He forced attention, nearly 4,000 receiving yards, 40 touchdowns, consistently outperforming everyone on the field. And what made it more impressive was how he did it, lining up in different spots, running routes that tight ends at the time were not expected to run, creating separation, making contested catches, showing flashes of something that looked different. And even then, there were moments where you could see something more. Plays where he would turn short passes into long gains, outrunning defenders that were supposed to be faster than him, breaking tackles that tight ends usually do not break. And those flashes were important because they showed that even though the level of competition was lower, the skill set was real. But even with all of that, the NFL still did not fully believe in him. And that is because of timing. The league was not ready yet. Tight ends were blockers first, receivers second, and Sharpe did not fit that mold. He was too small to block like a traditional tight end, not quite labeled as a wide receiver, and that left him in between, a tweener, and that label followed him into the draft. And when the 1990 draft came around, it showed 6 rounds passed with nothing, no call, no recognition, no belief, and you can imagine what that feels like. Watching name after name get called, players you believe you are better than getting opportunities you are not getting. And finally, in the 7th round, the Denver Broncos took a chance. But even then, it was not a full commitment. They did not see him as a tight end, they moved him to wide receiver. And that decision almost cost him everything, because for the first 2 years of his career, he barely made an impact. Minimal catches, limited role, almost invisible in an offense led by John Elway. And that is the part of the story where most careers quietly end. A late round pick who never finds his role, slowly phased out, replaced by someone else, forgotten, and at the same time, Sterling was still dominating in Green Bay, stacking Pro Bowls, stacking all-pro seasons, becoming one of the faces of the league, and that contrast made it look like Shannon might never reach that level. Like maybe he was just going to be a role player, someone who never fully breaks through. But then came 1992, and this is where everything changed. One decision, move him back to tight end, and instantly you could see it. Over 600 receiving yards, leading all tight ends, but more importantly, changing how defenses had to play. Because now you had a tight end who could stretch the field, who could run routes like a wide receiver, who could create mismatches against linebackers who were too slow and defensive backs who were too small. And that forced defenses to adjust in real time. And that is where the shift begins. Because once defenses have to adjust to you, you are no longer just a player. You are a problem. Then came 1993, and this is where he made the leap from good to elite. 81 receptions, nearly 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, first team All-Pro. And it was not just the numbers, it was how he was getting them. Third downs, red zone situations, key moments where the offense needed something, he delivered. And that is what separates great players from good ones. Reliability when it matters most. And you could see the connection with Elway growing stronger. Timing routes, trust throws, situations where Elway would throw the ball before Sharpe even made his break. And that only happens when there is complete trust. But just as Shannon reached that level, everything changed again. Sterling suffered a neck injury and his career ended immediately. And that moment hit differently because it was not just losing a brother on the field. It was losing what could have been a potential Hall of Fame career cut short. And from that point on, Shannon played with something extra, something deeper, something personal. And you could see it in how he approached the game. More intensity, more emotion, more urgency. By the mid-1990s, Shannon Sharpe was not just part of the offense. He was the offense in key moments. The player Elway looked for when things broke down, when plays needed to be made. And there were games where you could see it clearly. Defenses trying to take him away, bracketing him, hitting him at the line, doing everything they could to disrupt him. And it still did not matter. He found ways to produce. But even with all that success, the ultimate goal had not been reached. And in 1996, it felt like it finally would be. 13 wins, one of the best teams in football. Sharpe over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. Everything lined up perfectly, and then it all fell apart in the first round. A shocking loss that reset everything, and that loss created pressure because Elway was getting older and time was running out, and this is where great players separate themselves. Not when things are easy, but when they have to respond. And in 1997, they did exactly that. The Broncos came back focused, physical, playing with something to prove, and Sharpe delivered another elite season. Over 1,000 yards again, leading all tight ends by a wide margin. But the playoffs are where it mattered. Big plays, clutch moments, consistency under pressure. And you could feel the difference in how the team carried itself, like they were not going to let the same thing happen again. And finally, the Super Bowl, Denver versus Green Bay. The defending champions, the favorites. And for a while, it looked like the Packers were in control, but Denver stayed in it, drive after drive, hit after hit. And when the game ended, the Broncos had done it. And in that moment, Shannon Sharpe completed one of the most unlikely journeys in the league. From Division II to 7th round pick to Super Bowl champion. But what he did next mattered even more. He gave that ring to his brother Sterling because everything he had accomplished was connected to that relationship, and then somehow they did it again. In 1998, the Broncos were even better. 14 wins, one of the most dominant teams of the decade, blowing out opponents, controlling games, and Sharpe once again played a major role. 10 touchdowns, consistent production, leadership, helping drive the team to back-to-back championships, and at that point, his legacy was already secure, but he was not finished. In 2000, he joined the Baltimore Ravens, and this is where his career takes another interesting turn, because now he was on a team built completely around defense, a team that did not rely on offense to win. But Sharpe changed that dynamic. He became the go-to option in the passing game, led the team in receiving, and gave them something they did not have before, a reliable threat that could change field position and create explosive plays. And then came one of the most iconic moments of his career, the 96-yard touchdown in the AFC Championship game. And what made that play special was not just the distance, it was the timing, the awareness, catching the ball deep in his own territory and then turning upfield and outrunning everyone. A tight end going the length of the field in one of the biggest games of the season. And that play completely shifted momentum and sent Baltimore to the Super Bowl. And once again, he finished the job. 3 championships. And now the conversation changes. Because when you start comparing tight ends, you are not just looking at stats, you are looking at impact. And this is where Shannon Sharpe separates himself. Over 10,000 receiving yards, over 800 receptions, numbers that were unheard of for tight ends at the time. But more importantly, he helped redefine what the position could be. Before, Sharpe tight ends were not the focal point of an offense. After him, he showed that a tight end could be a primary weapon, a mismatch creator, a game changer. And that changed how offenses were built, how defenses had to respond. And that opened the door for the next generation. Tony Gonzalez, Antonio Gates, Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce, players who built on what Sharpe helped create. So when you ask the question, how good was Shannon Sharpe actually? The answer is not just in the stats, it is in the impact. Statistically elite, at his peak, one of the best in the league, but beyond that, revolutionary, a player who changed the position itself. And that is something very few players in NFL history can say. So no, he was not just good, he was one of the most important tight ends to ever play the game.